All right. Good morning, everyone. My name is Jen Espinosa-Goswami. I am excited to bring to you my special guest, Heather. Is it Kroska or Kroska?
Kroska.
Kroska, Heather Kroska from Food Science Mom. Now, the very fun thing about Heather is we met on Instagram, and I'm not a big Instagram person. I still don't get it. I'm trying. But I think I'm perhaps too old for the demographic on Instagram. But the good part about Instagram is I meet so many amazing people like Heather today. So I'm very grateful for Instagram. But if you're new to this group, welcome so much. In addition to the monthly guest expert interviews that we host, I also do challenges. Currently, I'm doing a 30 days of gratitude daily prompt challenge. It's not a challenge so much as it's a daily thing you can participate in that's completely free in this group. And in addition to that, I do have free resources for you to boost your health in a way that makes sense for you, including meal plans in the description of this group. So welcome to the group, and welcome especially Heather. How are you today?
I'm good, thank you.
Awesome. Well, today will be an interview style, so we're excited to hear more about what a food scientist does and what you did in the industry and what you're currently working on. You ready to get started?
Sure, let's go.
Awesome. And for those of you who are watching us, welcome, but also please make sure to give StreamYard permission to share your name. I will try to look in the group and see who is commenting. Otherwise, I don't know your name, so I'd prefer to talk to you by name. If you're here and you took the time, I would like to recognize you by your name. So make sure to give StreamYard permission so I can see that. But all right, Heather, I'm so excited to learn more about what a food scientist is. Before we jump into that, I do want to give you a proper introduction. So Heather Kroska of Food Science Mom, I will share her Facebook group link with you. That's what she's sharing with you today. But after working as a food scientist for 20 years, Heather had a baby and decided to become a stay-at-home mom. She's mom to 1-year-old Rex, and she has 2 Italian greyhounds named Martin and Niles. Now, she shared with me there are 2 reasons she decided to start blogging. So she's rather new to the blogging world. Way to go, Heather. And she said the 2 reasons are she misses the food industry, and she misses talking about it and sharing some of the information she learned while she was working there. And secondly, she sees too much misinformation, which we'll be talking about this morning, spread between moms about food. And you may be one of those moms who's like, oh my God, I'm so concerned about food. We're hearing all these studies on different things about food. I'm a little scared on what to feed my child. So Heather will clarify those things for us with her unique perspective. So she wanted to share her voice and tell people, especially moms, what the truth is about food. So welcome so much, Heather. How are you today?
Very good. Thank you for the introduction. That
Yeah.
pretty much sums it up, I would say.
Well, wonderful. I'm curious because I had never heard of anyone who worked as a food scientist before. What does that mean? How did you
So,
come to that?
yeah. So it was when I was in school, which was about 20 years ago, a little over that. It was a pretty new field, and it was sort of something that chemists were doing at the time, and they created kind of a new major so that you could focus on the science of food specifically. So my major was called food science. I went to Iowa State University. And it's a little of everything. It's a lot of chemistry and organic chemistry, nutrition classes. And then they do, go into a little bit more specific about the science of food. So you take a food chemistry class, food quality classes. And then some of the classes we even did cooking in. So you'd bake a cake and then talk about what went wrong, what was going on chemically, that sort of thing. So it's a little bit of nutrition, a little bit of food, a little bit of cooking, a little bit of chemistry, all kind of bound into one. There are a couple different fields that people go into. One is quality assurance, and that's making sure that your food is safe, mainly, and that it meets expectations, consumer expectations, that it's always consistent. And those people generally work at the food plants. There's another one where you go into straight research and development. You might work for an ingredient company, and that's more where you've got the laboratory, the white coat, the goggles on, you're researching ingredients and food specifically. I went into product development, which is, in my opinion, the most fun, where I'm actually developing the food products themselves. where you create the recipes, the formulas, as we call them, test them, taste them over and over and over again until you get, the product that you want. And we work with nutrition profiles a lot. A lot of times you're trying to meet a specific nutrition profile. One thing I worked on years ago was healthy choice frozen meals. And the word healthy on a label actually has very specific regulations related to fat, saturated fat, sodium, and then you have to have a certain level of vitamins and minerals, at least one that is at least 10%. So that's a little bit about what I've done over the years. My most recent job in the industry, I worked on macaroni and cheese. Mostly the dry box macaroni and cheese. So I am like the mac and cheese expert. And I'm trying to get this camera thing right there. There we go. That's better.
You're good.
So I spent almost 2 years just working on nothing but macaroni and cheese. So really fun. I get a little tired of tasting it. And now I feed my son Rex mac and cheese all the time. And I'm a little picky about what I want to give him, but he likes the straight Kraft macaroni and cheese, unfortunately, much to my dismay. So
yeah, well, I was curious about that, especially because you worked on mac and cheese for so long. There's a lot of information out there about, don't eat the Kraft mac and cheese because it's all gross and processed and all that stuff. Go for Annie's organic because it's organic. So do you have an opinion on the best mac and cheese?
It's not organic. Just does not mean much. I mean, it does. It's different processing, different rules and regulations for growing the wheat and such, but it doesn't mean safer. It doesn't mean healthier. And that's the important thing to understand. Kraft, their label looks a little bit weird because they break it out and they don't take cheese and dry it. So you can't actually find the word cheese in there. You see cheese enzymes, but not cheese, because they take the ingredients to make cheese and dry that into a powder rather than having the physical cheese itself. So yes, the ingredients look a little bit scarier, but is it really any better for you? Not really. The organic Annie's, and taste-wise, the Annie's just isn't very good, honestly, if you compare them side by side.
That has been my experience. My children will not eat the Annie's variety. I tried it, and I'm like, it's dry. It's not very tasty. Yeah.
It's expensive. Yeah. I think the thing with mac and cheese to watch is sodium. It can be really high. So if they're eating a lot of it, watch the sodium. But, with my kid, it's something he will eat, and eating is what's most important, feeding him and getting him food. So if mac and cheese is something he eats, then that's one of the things I feed him.
Yes. Very good point. Very good point. So that's interesting that you went to Iowa State and your degree was in food science. Did you get a job right after you graduated from Iowa?
I did. I went and I worked for a company that makes freeze-dried ingredients. Okay. And freeze drying is an amazing thing because it's the only drying method where you retain the color and the shape and all of the nutrition. Other methods don't do that. So freeze-dried ingredients are really amazing, but they tend to be expensive and they're not really available to consumers. There's a little bit out there now. You can get freeze-dried strawberries and such. I actually buy freeze-dried peas for my son. That's one of his favorite snacks. It's one of the ways that I get him vegetables is freeze-dried vegetables. So that was my first job, was working with that for a freeze-dried company. And then I work for Big Food, ConAgra Foods, which is where I worked on frozen meals like Healthy Choice and Marie Callender's.
Yeah. So there's a lot of questions I get as a health coach around, those lean cuisines and Healthy Choice. And I think lately there has been a move away from those types of TV dinner meals. Do you have an opinion? And you mentioned that there's very strict nutrition protocols around those types of meals. Do you think that any are any better than the other, or what would you have to say about the nutrition in those?
It depends on the terms. The word healthy has more restrictions than the word lean. But just look at the ingredients. Look at the nutrition panel. Some of them are terrible. The Marie Callender's are not very healthy. They are tasty. But they're not as processed, I would say, as people tend to think they are. I mean, it's meat, it's starch, a rice or pasta and a sauce. And what the food scientist did, what I did, was mainly creating a sauce. And creating that sauce is something like you would do in the kitchen. I mean, we put the ingredients together, we cook it in a great big kettle. So it's not super processed, I would say, as much as people tend to think it is. As far as looking at them, there you can get some pretty healthy ones. The healthy choice, I would say, there are some good options out there. You just have to look at that nutrition panel, look at the back. Banquet, you're not going to get a very healthy meal. It's going to be high in fat and sodium. So, you get what, it's not going to taste as yummy either. So,
right. Yeah. And was that part of your work as a food scientist, is making sure it tasted really well? Can you share a story of a bad taste test?
Right. Oh yeah. There's plenty of things that we'd make and they just didn't taste well, especially with the healthy choice because of the sodium restriction. It's hard to make something tasty with lower sodium. That's just kind of how it is. So.
Awesome. So I think about that because I think many of us do not know that there's a taste element to it, that people have to actually, did you do focus groups for that? Or was it just the scientists who were creating the foods that were taste testing it?
Yeah, there's a variety of tests. Sometimes it's focus groups. Usually it's a consumer panel where they would bring consumers in and give them the meal and ask them questions about, the taste, the texture, would you buy this product, et cetera. So, and they'd rank it and we'd say, nope, it doesn't meet our criteria for, putting out there in the marketplace, and we'd go back to work.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times it's comparing it to a competitor product as well.
Okay.
Is as good or better than a competitor product?
Makes sense.
Yeah.
All right. I'm just looking at my questions. Sorry. This has all been so fascinating. I don't know what to ask next because I'm a very curious person. So I'm like, oh my gosh, what else should I know about this? What would the day in the life of when you were working for Conagra or one of the other companies you worked for, what would your typical daily thing look like?
I mean, it's a lot of, sitting at your computer reading emails, of course, and going to meetings, as most jobs are. But then there's the time in the laboratory, and laboratories were mostly just giant kitchens. It's not what people picture. It's a big kitchen with lots of stove tops and countertops and such. I did wear a lab coat, I suppose, just to keep my clothing clean. But it's testing a formulation over and over again to get the right, the right taste, the right texture. There's testing. You might test how thick the sauce is. You want it to be a certain viscosity, we call, which is how thick it is.
Yeah.
Test the color. You want the color to be consistent. You want to make sure that it's going to hold up in a freezer. Like cooking with flour, per se, you can't freeze that and thaw it and have it turn out well. So that's why you see a lot of different ingredients on in processed foods, is because they have to be stable through all of these processing conditions. And you want it to survive, canning or freezing and still turn out to be a really tasty, good texture product. So a lot of testing of ingredients, mainly, spending that time in the laboratory, cooking things up and tasting it most of the days. Yeah.
That's interesting that you bring it up about flour. Flour does not reconstitute so well if you're heating something or thawing it, or
right.
Is that why you see so many things like soy added to products or other types of like cornstarch and potato starch, because that takes the place of flour?
Yeah, you usually see modified food starch is what you see, which is usually some sort of a modified cornstarch. Yeah, and that's that it's just more stable through processing.
Mm-hmm.
Freezing
Interesting.
And thawing and reheating. Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I recently did a presentation for a gluten-free festival, which was super fun. Yeah. But what I was sharing was about there's a lot of like plant-based meats out there right now, like mm-hmm. the Impossible Burger and the Beyond and all these things. And even some fast food places are taking these products on. Right. I feel like there's a drive to less meat and more plant-based meats, mm-hmm. which aren't really meat. But do you have any insight as to the processing that goes into those and whether they actually might be beneficial for people?
I don't have a lot of experience with those products per se, so I don't know what goes into the processing. But I know that some of them are healthy and some of them really aren't that great, you know? I think some of the bean burgers, you know, they aren't as tasty, but they are healthier than some of the new Impossible burgers and such. But if you're looking for a meat alternative, there's a lot of great options out there now, which is exciting.
Right. Right. Yeah, I was curious about that because I always look at food labels, and I always ask my clients to do the same.
Right.
But when you're looking at a food label and you can't really pronounce half of the things on that label, or you don't recognize them for what they are. Like, I noticed you shared a post, which was very intriguing. I think it was on Instagram, about all the ingredients, and the food it was describing was a banana. But like the ingredients list looked really scary to a lot of people. They're like, what is this? You know, so
exactly.
Do you have any like tricks of the trade in terms of like some of those really complicated scientific names and how you can really decipher what that means as a consumer?
I mean, you know, people always say if you can't pronounce it, don't eat it. And I would say if you can't pronounce it, look it up. Look it up. Look it up on a reputable site, not Food Babe, okay? Because she is full of it. But look it up and see what it's used for. You know, there's a reason every ingredient goes into a food product. Nobody wants to put ingredients in there that don't need to be there. There's a reason for all of them. And keep in mind that everything in the world is chemicals. Everything, our bodies, our world is made up of chemicals. So when people say, oh, the food is full of chemicals, well, yeah, it is. Water is a chemical. Water is dihydrogen monoxide. And people think that, oh, that sounds scary, but it's water. Let's just keep in mind everything is chemicals. And just because it's not something you're familiar with doesn't mean it's dangerous or scary. And also keep in mind that the dose makes the poison. So everything is toxic at a certain level. Water is toxic. Caffeine is toxic. Everything is toxic at a certain level. So when you see things, oh, that's a toxic ingredient, well, is it at that level though? Is it parts per billion? You know, are you going to have to eat 600 servings of it to cause damage? Then you're okay. You know? So there's just things to consider like that. Chemicals aren't scary. Everything is made of chemicals. Like you said, that graphic I have of the banana, it's if a banana had an ingredient list, it's this lengthy list of chemical names. Thankfully, we don't have to list those out for bananas, but we do for other ingredients, and then it makes things look scary.
That's a really good point, because I know a lot of people are terrified of sugar or sugar's impact on our bodies and things like that. I think that's the number one question I get. Like, should I go sugar-free, or how do I go sugar-free? Mm-hmm. And I've written articles about how you can identify sugar on a label. So there's many different pseudonyms and aliases for sugar. But I love that you say, you know, don't automatically be scared of it if you don't recognize what it is or can't pronounce it. You can look it up and determine, is that just the chemical name for it? It could be quite harmless, mm-hmm. depending on what you're looking for. Of course, you should always be aware of what it is you're ingesting or giving to your family, because that's important to be considering. I also like that you share the dose is the poison. So some foods are completely loaded with salt, in your experience with the TV dinners, or sugar in, you know, recent experience where there's a lot of awareness around that. So I think that's a really good rule of thumb is, yeah, a little bit is not going to kill you. You know, long-term effects are not there perhaps in a smaller dose of something. It's okay to tread with caution in those cases. So those are really great tips. Right. I love that. So you're a stay-at-home mom now. How is that working out?
It's good. I love it. You know, my son I became a mom later in life, so it's a little bit different for me. You know, all of my friends had kids long ago, and then I had one, and wow, I had no idea how wonderful and magnificent being a mom would be. He's just the greatest joy. So, but of course it's been a huge change not working for me. So that's why, you know, one of the reasons I started Food Science Mom for something, you know, for fun. And then I'm starting to do a little bit of consulting on the side as well, but I love being a stay-at-home mom, and especially now during COVID, you know, it's, well, I'm home all the time.
Yeah, well, it's a blessing, isn't it? I mean, there's just challenges with any role you take on in life, whether that's mom or food scientist or anything in between. Mm-hmm. So I'm glad you're able to spend that time with your son, Rex. And what type of consulting are you doing now?
Just it's actually for a company that I used to work for. I can't talk about it too much, but
Oh, okay. It's
yeah,
on the down low. Okay.
yeah.
Awesome. Well, obviously, as a stay-at-home mom, before we were in shelter in place with COVID regulations and
Mhm.
everything, you might have run across other moms on the playground or during play dates or preschool or whatever may be the case. What are some of the top misconceptions that you're hearing from other stay-at-home moms or moms that you come across, even family members?
Yeah, I think we've covered some of them kind of, but I can go over them again.
Sure.
One is just that processed food is evil and the food industry is evil. Food is full of chemicals and the industry is trying to poison you. And, like I said before, no one's trying to do that. No one wants to put ingredients in food that don't have to be there. And the food scientists themselves eat more of that food than anybody else. So they aren't going to put anything in there that's dangerous, because I ate more mac and cheese than anybody I've known. Don't be afraid of things that you don't know about. I will say that there's marketing that goes on in the food industry that can be a little iffy, like the cartoon characters on cereal, that's not great. On the sugary cereals, so marketing's a little bad there, but I would say it goes both ways. As far as if you walk into Whole Foods and you see things non-GMO, organic, gluten-free, blah, 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 blah. I feel like that's fear mongering as well, trying to scare people thinking that your food isn't safe unless it's this. And that's just not true either, which would be kind of my second misconception, is that organic, natural, non-GMO is better. It's really not. If you feel better feeding your kids and your family organic and non-GMO and you can afford it, that is totally fine. That's awesome. But if you can't afford it, don't feel that you need to, because the science is not there that it's safer, that it's more nutritious. Organic is not pesticide free. That's a common misconception. Organic does use pesticides, some of them even more toxic than traditional pesticides. Glyphosate is the one that gets all of the media coverage. And again, it's the dose makes the poison. It's completely safe. And it's been around for many years. And the amount that you might get, this minuscule amount, is not going to hurt you. Like I said, some of the more organic pesticides are more toxic. So don't feel that you need to buy, organic, non-GMO. The other thing is the word natural has no meaning. There is no legal definition of the word natural. You can call anything natural. So again, it's not safer. It doesn't mean more nutritious, anything like that. So don't be fooled by some of the labels. Non-GMO as well. Just because a product doesn't have that non-GMO butterfly on it doesn't mean that it is a GMO. It just means that that company didn't go through the non-GMO verification process. And the non-GMO project, I'm not a real fan of them. They are a money-making business. They're not a nonprofit. They are a money-making business. And it costs a lot of money and a lot of effort to get that little butterfly on your product. And that cost gets passed on to the consumer. So you're paying more for that little butterfly on the product. And again, there's not any proof that non-GMO is safer or more nutritious. It's a very common misconception. GMOs have been around for 30 years and, we haven't caused any major health effects with them. So one example of good GMOs is insulin. Insulin uses GMOs, and that's an amazing thing. So GMOs are actually really amazing. And there's actually just a GMO wheat that was just developed in Argentina, only in Argentina at this point, so don't worry about it yet. But it's drought tolerant, and it uses a low carbon footprint. So again, a really good thing. Sorry, I'm getting off on a little tangent here.
No, this is exciting because
anyway,
people don't know about GMOs.
Don't feel that you need to buy organic, natural, non-GMO. They're not healthier. They're not safer. If you feel better about it and can afford it, do it. But don't feel that you need to.
Interesting. Well, I'm sure just those comments alone will help people watching this video to know that they don't have to, drop their money down the toilet, especially if they're on a really strict budget right now,
Right.
to get those labels, to get that certification, to get the butterfly or the whatever. And it's a good point you bring it up that the non-GMO project is a money-making business. It's not just there for our concern or our safety.
Right.
They're charging companies and farmers and people who are producing these products a good deal of money to get that certification.
Yeah.
And from what I understand, like just from the little I know about, or getting certified organic or non-GMO, it's like it's years worth of time and effort and quality assurance to be able to get those kinds of certifications. So as you mentioned, it is kind of a money-making enterprise all around. And yet this feeling that it's nutritionally superior is not supported by any of the research out there.
Right. Yeah. And one more little comment about the non-GMO project. I don't feel that they're not the scientific organization people might think they are. My experience with them a few years ago, we were trying to get a honey product approved, and it took about a year of going around and around with them. And they said, well, we don't really have, any regulations around honey yet, but we're thinking maybe that it shouldn't be within 4 miles of a GMO crop, and we'll check that on Google Maps. So that's the kind of thing we're doing. Like, how are you going to tell if a crop is GMO on Google Maps? What? So, yeah, I think it's a little bit better, right? But just a little goofy. Organic is a little more strict, and they have their things together. Getting organic certified is a different situation than the non-GMO project, I would say. But yeah, and there's so many certifications out there.
Right. Yeah, and some of them are more closely regulated by the FDA than others. So that's something I've discovered in my research as well. Be cautious as far as you can. But like you said, we may not know as much about how those businesses are operating and what they require to get those labels and those terms. And it just brings me back to when you mentioned about natural. I hate when I see natural on anything, because I'm like, you're right, it doesn't mean anything. Nobody's regulating anything. It's just a marketing mumbo jumbo, and people are like, well, it's all natural. It doesn't mean anything. So frustrating. Well, this has been fascinating, Heather. I appreciate you coming and sharing your knowledge with the group. Is there any last things or tips that you'd like to share, especially with the moms in the group, because we do have quite a few moms, like things maybe that they think they're, protecting their children from, or things that maybe they're like, oh my God, my kid eats all of this and it's not good. Do you have any last tips you'd like to share with us?
Oh boy. That's a hard one. I think we've covered a lot of it. I'll go ahead and plug what my next post is going to be, maybe.
Yeah,
one of the next
good.
things.
So Heather's a blogger, so check her out.
Yeah, something that people need to be aware of is raw flour. Raw flour if you eat cookie dough, people think it's the raw eggs that are dangerous. Raw flour is actually just as dangerous. It can carry E. coli, salmonella, even listeria. So be very careful of raw flour. And the reason this came about for me is I was trying to look up like a Play-Doh recipe for my son. And I found that everything out there, almost everything, all these no-cook Play-Doh recipes, they use raw flour. And not only is that not safe for them to taste, it's not safe for them to play with, because if their hands go to their mouth later, you can pick up E. coli. So that's a little coming preview of my next post. It's something that people don't really think about. That Pinterest is full of these no-cook and taste-safe Play-Doh recipes that use raw flour, and that's really not a good idea.
Oh, so is that across the board for any type of flour, even if you're using other things like, gluten-free flour blends or whatever?
Yeah, it depends on the grain processing, really. So I'm mainly talking about wheat flour because it doesn't have a lot of processing. It's mainly milled and lightly dried. And, contamination happens in the field because of the animals.
Oh.
So people just don't realize that raw flour is actually dangerous. Sorry, I've got a lot of glow on my face now, don't I?
You're glowing, Heather. It's a good thing. Well, I think that was a very timely tip. So thank you, especially as I'm looking ahead to holiday Christmas cookies. And I scold my kids. My kids are older, but I scold them so bad every time they try to eat the raw dough. Cause I'm like, for me, I always thought it was the eggs. I'm like, there's raw egg in there. Don't you dare. But it's the flour. And a lot of people are baking with COVID and everything, the quarantine baking. So thank you so much for that tip. Plus the handmade Play-Doh and things like that. I mean, sensory play and all of that. It's really important. And a lot of moms are doing it and looking to Pinterest for that information. So thank you for sharing that. That has been really eye-opening for me. Awesome. Well, I want to thank you, Heather, again for coming here and sharing your knowledge with the group. I will, for those of you who are watching the replay, please let me know in the comments below. If you're watching the replay, Heather will be watching the video. I will be tagging her. If you have any questions that you want to address to her, feel free to share this underneath the video. I will be keeping this video up in Wait No More for at least a couple more days, so you have time to catch up. This has been a great conversation, Heather. I look forward to watching out for your blog post. Check her out at, I posted her Facebook group. It's Food Science Mom on Facebook. Go like her page. Go say hi to her. Check out her blog. And thank you so much, Heather. This has been a wonderful conversation today.
Thank you so much, Jen.
All right, take care.
All right, bye.
Bye.